How's it going, everyone? Taki here. This is going to be a tutorial video for the new SUPER5 OLED kit for the Switch Lite. Inside the main box, we have a protective case that holds the screen and a few other things, an organizer for your screws, a suction cup to get out your screen, and a set of DIY tools that you'll need to do the installation. This packaging may look a little different when this ships next month, but essentially what we have inside that Pelican case is an FPC, a battery adapter, a metal backplate, and the screen itself. Again, this version of the kit does not come with a touch panel, but it does come with an OCA glass panel and a matching bezel. There are two main ways you can perform the base kit installation, and I'm going to go through both of them in this video. The first is when you're in a situation where you have a shell that you want to reuse. In this case, I have a Pokemon shell, and it's in pretty decent condition. I bought this just for the purposes of this video, and the person that had this before me seems to have taken good care of this. Now, I already have this exact switch, so normally I would just use this as an opportunity to do a shell swap, but I'm going to be giving this one away, so it doesn't really matter. But that's enough of that. Let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is hold down the power button to power off the device. Once the unit is powered off, it's time to start removing some screws. Inside your kit, you will have a multi-bit screwdriver like this. When you remove the cap on the end, you will have the second bit, and this is the one that you're going to need to use for most of the entire installation. This brown one here is only used for 4 screws on the back, and that's what we're going to do now before switching over to the other one. So on this back shell here, we have 4 tri-wing screws. We're going to remove those with this bit, and then we're going to put them inside this organizer. I've done this mod probably about 20 times in the last couple of months, and I found that keeping your screws organized is a crucial part to speeding up how long this entire process takes. Okay, we have the 4 screws off. Now it's time to change our bit to the other one, and that's the one that we're going to need to use for the entire installation until we get back to this point at the end. Just take the bit out, put the new one in, slot it into place, and then tighten the top. On the top of the Switch Lite, we have 2 screws next to the shoulder buttons. We're going to remove those, and then we're going to take out the 2 that are on the bottom. Since all of these screws come from the same stage, I'm going to put them inside the first box in my organizer. At this point, we need to get our pick, and we need to start opening up this shell. Start over here on the corner, and then start working your way around the entire perimeter. Once you have the bottom free like this, you should be able to lift up the back frame and push it forward to get it over the shoulder buttons. And there we go, we have the back shell off. I'm going to put this off to the side because we won't need this for a while. Now we're on to step 2, where we need to take out this metal frame. There's one thing that I want you to take note of while we're here. As you'll see, there are 2 different color screws throughout this entire PCB. Generally speaking, the silver screws that you see are going to be the shorter ones, and the ones that have a greenish tint to them are longer. But anyway, we have 4 screws on this back shield. We have one here, and one here. These are all the same size and the same color. And then we have one with a greenish tint over here in the corner. So we'll go ahead and take off the 4 screws. Once you have all the screws out, it's time to take off this metal shield. You are going to lift up over here on the top left corner, and then you should be able to get the entire thing free. Just be careful with your fingers because this does have thermal paste on the back. And as you can see, we have 3 small screws and 1 bigger screw that has a greenish tint. I'm going to put all 4 of these inside the second tray. Now that we have the metal frame off, the next thing that we have to do is disconnect the battery. And for this, we're going to use our tweezers. There are a few connectors on this board that you have to be very careful with. This one's not one of them, but you do want to be gentle with it as a general rule. Lift up on the flap, and then you are going to pull back on the FPC, and then you will see the battery connector. You can use your fingers for this, or you can use the tweezers, but we need to go ahead and disconnect the battery. Now the next thing that we're going to do is kind of a hack for this installation. If you were going to be replacing this screen with another screen, you would have to do an extensive teardown, but since we are only replacing this with a screen that doesn't have a touch panel, the entire process is much easier for us. The first thing that we want to do is lift up on this flap over here on the corner. This is the FPC for the backlight. Lift up on the flap, and then you are going to pull out the FPC cable. From here, we're going to start working on the heatsink. Get your screwdriver and take out the 3 screws that are holding this in place. Again, these are the small silver screws. Now that we have that free, we need to pry up on the corner here to be able to get this entire thing out. The fan is going to stay in place, but there is some adhesive material over here, so it will require a bit of force to get this thing to come free. And there you go. I pried it up. just get your pry tool on the other side of this and then push up. And then you can use your fingers to get the entire thing free. You're going to want to be careful with this copper pipe here. It's very easy to bend, but as long as you follow those steps, you shouldn't bend it. Once you have that free, I like to put this down on the metal plate in this orientation. Our next step is to remove these 4 screws on the headphone jack and these 3 screws on the cartridge reader. And as you can see, these are the same size screws that we took off from the heatsink. So all of these are going to go together. At this stage, you should have 10 small silver screws. I'm going to take all of these and put them inside the 3rd tray. The next thing that we need to do is take out this so we can get access to the touchscreen FPC and the screen FPC. Just lift up on this latch. You can use the tweezers or your fingers. And then you're going to lift up on the cartridge slot and then pull in this direction. There you go. At this point, you need to pay special attention to this connector right here. The connector that Nintendo used on this is not the best in the world, and it is easier to ruin this than it probably should be. What you want to do is gently lift up on this connector in the center so that way you don't apply too much pressure on one side or the other. I find the best way to do this is just to use your fingernail. So I'm going to put my finger directly in the center like this. And I'm going to lift up. And there you go. I'm going to do the same thing over here in the corner with the touch panel. Now you need to take your tweezers and gently pull back on the display ribbon cable. So I'm going to loop underneath, pinch it down, and then very gently pull this out. And there you go. Nothing was damaged. I'm going to do the same thing for the touch panel. And there we go. At this point, we have almost completely freed the display from this assembly. The only thing that we need to do is actually take it out. And this is something that you would not be able to do with a normal screen, but you can do it with this mod. So I'm going to flip this over now and just be cautious of this thermal paste here. If you have a plastic bag or something like that, you can just put that on top of this and then you won't have to worry about this getting on your desk. Now we're at the point where we need to free the display from this shell. And this is going to look different depending on how you want to approach this situation. If you are replacing a broken screen, then you don't need to be too cautious at this point because you're not going to ruin anything that matters. The screen that I have in here is actually pretty decent and I want to hold on to it for repair purposes. So I am going to go through and show you the slow and easy method. We have a few tools to aid us in this operation. We have a suction cup with a reinforced ring handle, and we have 2 pry tools. Technically, you can get this out without using any heat, but what we want to do is use a blow dryer on a low setting around the corners and slowly pry up the touch panel before we can get to the LCD underneath. If you have any protective glass on top of your screen, now is the time to remove it. And just as a demonstration, you don't really need to use heat to get this out, but not using heat increases the likelihood that you will destroy the screen underneath this panel. As you see, when I lift up on this suction cup, the touch panel is starting to come free, so it won't take much work once we apply heat to this. There's not much to this. We're just going to start off by heating up the corner over here on a low setting. And once we get this warm enough, we're going to use the suction cup to start prying up the entire touch panel. Okay, we're going to put the suction cup in the corner, press down, and get our guitar pick ready. We're going to lift up. And once you get your pick into place like this, you're just going to gently go around the corner and you should be able to free the display from the shell. And at this point, we should be able to free the screen. We just freed the backlight connector, and now we just need to worry about these two. And there we go, we have the entire display out, and it's still connected to the touch panel. You'll see that some of the adhesive material over here is coming off, but you can just easily push that back into place. Now we're almost ready to finish this entire installation. Before we can go on to the next step, we need to go ahead and remove this protective film over the adhesive material. Just lift up on the corner, and then you can get the entire thing free. Now you'll see we have this flat panel connector on the bottom over here. That is going to slide into this tiny gap that you see over here that goes directly under the battery. What we're going to do is we're going to position the cable so that way it can slide into that gap, and with any luck you'll see it pop out the other side of the battery. Pull up on that cable, and then we're almost ready for the last step. Position your screen so that way it's tilted into this bottom pocket here, and then you need to take the connector for the display and feed it through the hole. Once you see it over here on the other side, you can go ahead and grab that with your fingers, pull up on it, and then on the front, you can go ahead and push the screen into place. Go ahead and press around on all of the screen corners so that way it's stuck into place. The first thing that we need to do now is connect the screen to the motherboard. And again, this is the only point of failure in this entire operation. You need to make sure that you're lining this up correctly so that way you don't damage any of the pins inside this connector. Take your time. So I'm going to press down on the connector, and I'm going to line it up, and then I'm going to gently push it into place. Once you see that it lines up evenly across all of the pins, you can go ahead and fold the latch down. And there you go, it's done. Right now, things are pretty much smooth sailing. The only thing that we need to do is connect our screen to our battery board. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our power board, and we are going to connect it to the screen, and then we're going to connect this to the backlight power. Simply take your display connector and insert it into this assembly. This is how it should look like when you're done. For the next connector, we're going to need to use our tweezers. So go ahead, take the connector, and feed it through this 4-pin slot. Once you have it inserted, fold down the latch. Now we need to get all of this wired up. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our tiny battery cable, and we're going to plug one end of this into the motherboard. So I'm going to take the cable, push it into place gently, and at this point I need to take the flat panel connector and push it into place. And it's in place. I'm just going to close the latch. Now, one thing that I want to point out, this is not the final version of this assembly. There's one more revision that needs to take place before this can start shipping out in October. So this part right here won't look like this for you, but it does for me. What I need to do now is I need to connect the battery to this board, and then I need to connect the wire that's coming from the motherboard to the other connector over here. Once I do all of that, the screen is powered and everything else is done. To keep this all in place, I'm going to go ahead and remove the double-sided tape on the back, and I'm going to place this down right over here on top of this. And then all we have to do is wire this together. So I have the motherboard connected to the power board. Now I need to connect the battery to the power board. Just push down on the connector. And then we're done. I'm going to quickly go ahead and reposition this. Again, this wire right here needs one more revision. This is just the current prototype that we have right now. The retail version of this that ships out will be longer and it will line up better than it does here. Okay, now everything works, and I want to talk about one more point before we try to turn this on to test it. You'll see that we have two buttons here. These have different functions, and in the version of this that ships out, there will be a label on these telling you what they do. These are GPIO buttons, and one of these buttons will change the color profile. By default, this is going to be in what's called P3 mode, and that is going to have saturated colors. On the Switch OLED, there is a software option that you can use to change the color profile of the display. Since we don't have a software option with this, we need to use the hardware button. By default, this is in P3 color space, but if you want to use the sRGB color space, all you would do is press the button one time. Whatever value you set this to, it will save that value until the next time you press it. So this is a good point to go ahead and make sure that everything works. I'm going to rotate this around and I'm going to try to power on the unit. And there you go. You can see the Nintendo logo. Okay, so we have the unit turned on, and obviously we don't have any touch on this, which is part of the reason why this was so easy and so fast to install. We do have brightness control. So if we hold down on the right button, we can go into the brightness slider, and the system is able to control the brightness of the OLED display. I'm going to lower the brightness just to make it a bit easier to see the next point, which is the color calibration. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to press the rightmost GPIO button, and this is the button that will change the color profile. So what you should focus on right now are the reds, because those are going to be the most obvious when we press this. It's probably not going to come across on camera, but when you do this on your own, make sure to look at the reds, press the button, and then see if you are comfortable with the setting. The default setting is very similar to the default setting on an OLED Switch. The second GPIO button is just going to change the red levels of the display between 3 different values. You can cycle through those to find the one that looks pleasing to you. At this point, I have everything set up, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, and I'm going to shut off the Nintendo Switch. Now it's time to finish screwing everything back together. We're going to start off by doing the cartridge slot. We're going to get our cartridge connector, make sure the flap is lifted up, and then we're going to push it into place. All of the screws for this section are in the third container, so I'm going to lift that up. And these are all the same size, so I just need to get out the ones that I need to put this all back together. Okay, we only have 3 screws left after doing all of that. We're going to take our heatsink and gently push it into place. Then we need to screw that down. Okay, all of that's down. Now we just need to put on our aluminum shield. One thing that I want to point out, your shell will not look like this. This is just a prototype that we made for this video. The real one that was supposed to be used for this video is still being delivered to my house right now, and it's about 4 hours away, but it won't get here in time for this video, so we just made this one. But it will have this cutout here, and it does make it easy to access those GPIO buttons in the future if you ever want to change the color calibration. All of the screws for this are in our second compartment, so I'm going to open up that, and I'm going to dump it out. And we have 3 small screws and 1 green tinted screw. The green one goes over here in the corner, and this is pretty simple to put back together. We are almost done. Now we just need to put on the back plate again. And this is a bit annoying on some shells. What I found to be the easiest is if I put in this side first and then try to clip in the bottom. On some older shells, this part right here can come off, so it can be a bit annoying, but on this one it's locked into place, so I don't need to worry about that. So take your plate, put it around the top, and watch out for the shoulder buttons. And you just want to get it to clip into place around the R2 and L2. Once you do that, you should be able to get the entire thing to clip on. Okay, and we're going to do the 2 screws on the top and the 2 screws on the bottom before changing our screw bit to do the last 4. And all of these screws are inside the first compartment. I'm going to empty that out now. The small screws go on the top and the bottom, the big screws go on the back. Okay, we have 4 screws left. Change your screwdriver, screw it back in, and then get your 4 remaining screws. And there we go. We're all done. So that was an example of replacing a screen in a shell that you wanted to keep, but you didn't care about losing touch functionality. As you can see, it was very fast. In our next installation, we're going to do the same kit upgrade, But this time, we're going to swap our shells at the same time.